Okay, well, here are some lecture notes for Chapter 1 of Turner the Screw. Looking over it, if you remember what I talked about in the introduction, we're looking for ambiguity. Okay, the action in the beginning of Chapter 1, a succession of flights and drops, a little seesaw of the right throbs and the wrong. All of that really builds up where we have her confidence, to her feeling doubtful again, to her feeling like she made a mistake. So that ambiguity comes out already, even just with the action that's coming out, and then with her self-reflection that's met right here. Okay. As she gets to to Bly, she says, "I expected or had dreaded something so melancholy that what greeted me was a good surprise. I remember as a most pleasant impression the broad, clear front, its open windows and fresh curtains, and the pair of maids looking out. I remember the lawn and the bright flowers, and the crunch of my wheels on the gravel, and the clustered tree-tops over which the rooks circled and cawed in the golden sky. The scene had a greatness that made it a different affair from my own scant home." And then, of course, we meet Miss Gross, but notice right away that it sets up her own wealth and poverty in comparison to what we see here with the grandness of Bly. That grandness is going to be something that's important, that kind of builds her up a little bit. And remember that she, through clues and hints, will bring about the idea that she came from fairly humble and meek beginnings. So everything that she sees is something that's going to be more than what she had expected. Which goes a little further, right? I received in Holly Street a narrow notion of the place, and as I recalled it, made me think the proprietor still more of a gentleman, suggested that what I was to enjoy might be something beyond his promise. This idea that he had built this up to not be as nice, but it also builds up the fact that the gentleman is clearly very wealthy, whereas our governess narrator isn't used to that. When we start seeing Flora, interestingly, at least to me, because I'm always looking for these clues, is described emphatically as a beautiful creature, right? A creature so charming as to make it a great fortune to have to do with her. She was the most beautiful child I had ever seen, and I afterward wondered that my employer had not told me more of her. I slept little that night. I was much too excited, and this astonished me too, I recollect. Remained with me, adding to my sense of the liberality with which I was treated. But the fact that Flora is depicted in this somewhat objectified appearance, the beautiful child. And remember, part of this story is dealing with the suspected abuse of these children. So for her to belabor this idea of Flora's beauty may not be completely shady, but it's definitely something I'm a little skeptical of. Okay. They talk about her room, the large, impressive room with the best in the house, the great state bed, as I almost felt it, the full-figure draperies, the long glasses in which the first time I could see myself from head to foot. She had never seen a full-length mirror before. All struck her, like the extraordinary charm of my small charge, as so many things thrown in. Now, her suspicion appears right afterwards, where, as she thinks about it, I wondered even then a little why she should wish not to show it, not to show her happiness at seeing her again, and that with suspicion might of course have made me uneasy. So she's also very suspicious of others. We get this hesitation about trusting the narrator. Her perspective is somewhat skewed. She finds Miss Gross in this very descriptive way of loving her, of really appreciating her, of them having this connection, and yet, she feels kind of hesitant about trusting her as she thinks about it. Talking about Flora again, I'm going to go with my own skepticism here. They talk about her as the vision of whose angelic beauty had probably more than anything else to do with the restlessness that before morning made me several times rise and wonder about my room, to taking the whole picture in prospect. She's thinking very much about the beauty of Flora. We have some kind of creepy moments that appear. We have faint and far, the cry of a child that she thinks she hears. She hears what she thinks, the starting at the passage before my door of a light footstep. As she starts talking about Flora, interesting discussions, right? To watch, teach, form little Flora, which would evidently be the making of a happy and useful life. Forming Flora, so we have this idea of vegetation, of teaching and growing children. They talk a little bit about how she was to stay with Miss Gross, Flora was to stay with Miss Gross a little bit, because at the beginning, of course, there's going to be inevitable strangeness and natural timidity. She's going to open up to the governess pretty soon, but it's something that may not last, we're going to say. They do describe Flora, just to bring it home a little bit more, as one of Raphael's holy infants. Pretty strong description of Flora here. Okay. She has heavenly eyes, Flora does. As they talk about Miles, Miss Gross says you'll be carried away by the little gentleman. Well, that I think is what I came for, to be carried away. I'm afraid, however, she remembers to feel the impulse to add, I'm rather easily carried away. I was carried away in London, which is this romanticism that she has, and she's describing Miles here. Once again, to me, that's just a little strange, a little skeptical of this idea that she's already talking about Miles in this flirtatious way. Miles, who is very young, who is not at all mature, and who we're going to see there's going to be the suspicion of child abuse as we kind of go into this. From the previous people, from Peter Quint and Miss Jessel, that we're going to see, but here we right away have this concept that the governess feels like she'll be carried away romantically almost by Miles. Okay. Talking about the gentleman and how she was carried away and kind of fallen in love with the gentleman. Miss Gross catches on, says in Harley Street. She says yes in Harley Street. And Miss Gross says you're not the first and you won't be the last. This idea that he seduces women, younger women, and has this idea of their beauty, almost like a man choosing an attractive woman as a secretary or something like that. There's this underlying idea that he is, somewhat inappropriate. Okay. She says I have no pretension. She's not planning to be with him, and she doesn't pretend to be the only one who's ever fallen for the gentleman. Okay. We find out Miles is going to arrive the next day. Talks about Miss Gross being glad that she was there. As they kind of walk around, she starts feeling a slight oppression. So there's going to be that ambiguity, that idea of a little bit here, a little bit there. She feels a little scared, is a little proud. She starts thinking about lessons. She delays some of those lessons to try to get to know Flora a little better. She spends a day with her out of doors, arranged with her to her great satisfaction. It should be she only, who might show me the place. She showed it step by step and room by room and secret by secret, with droll, delightful, childish talk about it, and with the result in half an hour of our becoming immense friends. According to the governess, they're very close already. It says, I had the view of a castle of romance inhabited by a rosy sprite, such a place as would somehow, for the virgin young idea, talk all color out of storybook and fairy tales. Wasn't it just a storybook over which I had fallen to doze and dream? No, it was a big, ugly, antique, but convenient house embodying a few features of a building still older, half replaced, and half utilized, which I had the fancy of our being almost as lost as a handful of passengers in a great drifting ship. So that contrast between what Flora sees, this romantic castle, and then what the governess sees, which is an older building, kind of ugly, antique, is convenient. There are some nice things about it, but the ambiguity is there of what kind of house is this, to what degree is this beauty, to what degree is this nice, and to what degree is it, as she says, an big, ugly, antique house. Okay. We'll move into chapter 2 in just a moment.